All right. Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Always excited to dig into these stories.
Today, we're tackling a good one. And honestly, this one's got lessons for pretty much anyone, not just folks in media. We're looking at how the New York Times made this incredible shift, this transformation when the whole world was going digital. They used something called Agile. Well, let's just say it's a lot more interesting than it might sound at first.
Yeah, agile can seem like one of those buzzwords.
Yeah.
But seeing it in action, especially at a place like the Times, that's something else.
Exactly. So picture this, right? The newspaper industry, it's kind of freaking out a little. The internet's exploding, news is breaking online first, everything's happening at warp speed. Even a giant like the New York Times, they knew they couldn't just keep doing things the old way. So, expert speaker, what were some of the biggest, hurdles they had to overcome back then?
Oh, man, where do I even begin? It was a massive shift, right? Think about it. They were coming from this world of print, where everything was on a schedule, a daily printing cycle. Suddenly, they had to be on all the time, 24/7. News was breaking instantly online, and readers expected, like, up-to-the-minute updates.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the pressure. It's like they had to rebuild the plane while they were flying it.
Exactly. And they couldn't afford to crash, right? The Times has this huge reputation, this legacy of quality journalism. They had to evolve without losing what made them, well, them.
Okay, so that's where Agile comes in. I'd heard of Agile before, but seeing how the Times used it, it really opened my eyes.
It's fascinating, right? Because they didn't just use it to build a website or something. They used it to reinvent how the entire newsroom operated.
Whoa, okay, so it wasn't just about the tech, it was about the people, the processes, everything.
Everything. They adopted this framework called Scrum, which is all about these short, super focused development cycles. They call them sprints.
Sprints. So instead of these huge projects that take months to finish, they broke things down into smaller chunks.
Exactly. Smaller chunks, faster releases, constant feedback. It allowed them to be way more responsive to the news cycle, which was key in the digital world.
I see, I see. So instead of this big clunky update every few months, they were constantly making smaller improvements, right?
Yeah, and getting feedback from readers along the way, it was a much more iterative and honestly a much smarter way to work.
Okay, so we've got these sprints, we've got this focus on constant improvement, but it wasn't just about how they worked, right? They also changed who worked together. Am I right?
You're spot on. They started using cross-functional teams, which was huge. This meant breaking down those silos that can exist in big organizations.
Silos. You mean like the writers are over here, the tech people are over there, and never the twain shall meet.
Exactly. But in these cross-functional teams, you had journalists, developers, designers all working together, side by side.
Wow, I bet that led to some pretty interesting conversations. And I imagine it wasn't just about putting articles online anymore. It was about creating a whole new experience for the reader.
You
Right.
got it. They started experimenting with multimedia, interactive graphics, all these new ways to tell stories.
It was like they were figuring out what digital journalism could be, what it should be.
That's a great way to put it. It wasn't just about keeping up. It was about innovating and leading the way.
So we've got these smaller, faster work cycles. We've got teams from different disciplines coming together. What else? This is fascinating.
Oh, another key aspect was this emphasis on continuous learning and improvement.
Hmm.
They had these things called retrospectives, which I think is such a great term.
Retrospectives. I'm intrigued. What are those?
Basically, it's just a dedicated time for the team to come together and, well, reflect. They'd analyze what worked well during a sprint, what didn't work so well, and how they could improve next time.
Ah, so it's like a built-in feedback loop, not just delivering the news quickly, but always striving to do it better, smarter.
Exactly. And this wasn't just about making the Times better for the sake of it. It was all driven by a deep focus on the reader, the customer.
I was just about to ask about that. They were really trying to understand their audience, right?
Yeah.
Not just guessing at what they wanted.
You hit the nail on the head. Data became crucial. They tracked what readers were clicking on, how long they were staying on a page, all of it.
So they were using data to make smarter decisions about their content, about what their readers actually wanted.
Exactly. It was a huge part of their transformation. It really is remarkable when you think about it. They weren't just trying to, like, survive the digital age. They were determined to come out on top.
And they did. They didn't just survive, they thrived. Okay, so let's dive into the results a bit. One thing that's as so crucial in the digital age is the timeliness and relevance of news.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a world of instant updates, right? You got to be fast, you got to be accurate, or you're going to get left behind.
No pressure, right. So how did the Times make sure they were keeping up in that regard?
Well, this new way of working, this agile approach, it allowed them to be incredibly nimble. They can publish updates almost instantly, respond to breaking news as it happened.
That makes sense. Readers knew they could rely on the Times to be on top of things, no matter how quickly things were changing.
Exactly. It solidified their position as like this trusted source in a sea of, well, let's just say there's a lot of noise out there online.
For sure. But it wasn't just about speed, right? It was about what they did with that speed. And that's where I think the Times really shines when it comes to digital innovation. I'm thinking about all the cool stuff they were doing with interactive graphics, multimedia, all those elements that make online news so engaging.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely ahead of the curve on that front. They knew that digital journalism wasn't just about putting text on a screen. It was about creating a whole new experience for the reader.
And that must have helped them attract a whole new audience, too. I bet younger readers who are already used to a more visual, interactive online experience, they really responded to that.
Absolutely. It wasn't just their parents' newspaper anymore. The Times was becoming a multimedia powerhouse, something fresh and relevant for a new generation.
Okay, but hold on. We've got to talk about the elephant in the room, or, well, the newsroom. All of these changes, this massive shift in how they worked, it must have had a huge impact on the people, on the culture at the
Oh,
Times.
for sure. And you might think that such a big shakeup would lead to, like, chaos or resistance, but honestly, the opposite happened.
Really? So, how did Agile impact things like team morale and efficiency? Because that's not always an easy thing to get right during a big change.
Well, I think one of the most remarkable things about this story is how Agile, especially this Scrum framework, actually boosted morale and productivity.
That's fascinating. Why do you think that was the case?
I think it comes down to a few things. First, Scrum is all about collaboration and transparency. Everyone on the team knows what everyone else is working on. They're constantly communicating and giving feedback.
So, no more working in silos like we were talking about earlier.
Right. And second, because Scrum breaks projects down into these smaller sprints, people get to see the results of their work much faster. It's more tangible, more rewarding.
It's like that instant gratification thing. You see the impact of your work, and it motivates you to keep going.
Exactly. And that kind of motivation, that sense of ownership, it translates into higher quality work and faster turnaround times.
Which is crucial in the fast-paced world of digital news. So it sounds like they really found a system that worked for them, both in terms of keeping up with the demands of the digital age and maintaining a positive and productive work environment. But let's be real, it couldn't have all been smooth sailing, right? There had to be some bumps along the way, some challenges they had to overcome.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking about changing the mindset of an institution with over 170 years of history, right? That's no small feat.
Yeah, I imagine there were some people who were resistant to change, who were used to doing things the old way.
Of course. And that's totally understandable, right? Change can be scary, especially when you've been doing something a certain way for so long.
So how did they overcome that resistance? Because clearly they did.
This is where strong leadership was absolutely crucial. The Times had the right people at the helm to guide them through this period of massive change.
You're talking about people like Mark Thompson, the former CEO, right? He's the one with that famous quote about digital not being their savior, but subscriptions being the way forward.
That's the one. He brought this like digital first vision to the table, and crucially, he had the experience to back it up. He'd been through these kinds of transformations before.
So they had someone who wasn't afraid to shake things up, who understood the challenges and opportunities of the digital world, but he wasn't alone, right?
Right. Dean Buckay, who was the executive editor at the time, he played a huge role too. He was really good at bridging the gap between traditional journalism and the need to innovate digitally.
So they had one foot firmly planted in their legacy of excellence, while the other stepped boldly into the future.
Exactly. And both Thompson and Buckay, they were adamant about one thing: quality content. They knew that this digital transformation couldn't come at the expense of the New York Times' journalistic integrity.
That's so important. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of new technology and forget about the core values that make a news organization great.
Right. And the Times, they never lost sight of that. They were constantly innovating, experimenting with new formats and platforms, but they never compromised on their commitment to accuracy, depth, and fairness in their reporting.
It's a really delicate balance to strike, but they seem to have found it. And you know what? They found some truly innovative ways to deliver on that commitment to quality. I mean, take the New York Times cooking app, for instance. I am obsessed with that
Oh,
thing.
me too. It's genius, isn't it? Who knew a newspaper company could become a go-to for recipes?
Right. It just shows how well they understand their audience. They knew that people turn to the Times for more than just news. They turn to it for information that enriches their lives, whether it's a recipe, a movie review, a thought-provoking opinion piece.
Exactly. It's about meeting your audience where they are, with what they want. And they've done a phenomenal job of that.
And then there's Wordle. I mean, who hasn't spent countless hours trying to guess that elusive five-letter word?
I know, right? It's taken over the world. And it was such a smart acquisition for the Times.
Totally agree. It shows they're not afraid to look outside their own walls for innovation, to acquire products that already have a strong following and align with their audience.
And it's been hugely successful for them. Wordle brought in a ton of new subscribers and really put them on the map for a whole new generation of users.
It's brilliant, really. Okay, so before we get to the key takeaways for our listeners, I'm curious about something. They clearly made big changes in terms of how they worked and what they offered, but did they ever talk about why they were doing all of this? Like, what was their driving motivation beyond just surviving?
That's a great question. And yeah, they did talk about it. They understood that the world of news was no longer confined to print, that to remain relevant, to remain a leading voice in the world, they had to evolve with their audience.
So it wasn't just about surviving the digital revolution, it was about embracing it and shaping the future of news.
Exactly. They saw this massive shift not as a threat, but as an opportunity to reach new audiences, to experiment with new ways of storytelling, and to ensure that journalism, quality journalism, continued to thrive in the digital age.
It's actually really inspiring when you think about it. They could have easily just tried to hold on to the old ways, but they chose to adapt and evolve. But for our listeners who aren't media moguls, what are the key takeaways here? What can someone running a small business or managing a team, what can they learn from the New York Times' experience?
You know, the New York Times' journey is like a masterclass in how to navigate change, and these lessons, they really apply to anyone, no matter what field you're in.
It's true. It's like that saying, the only constant is change.
Yeah.
But the Times shows us that it's not about fearing change, it's about becoming its master.
Couldn't agree more. And one of the biggest takeaways for me is the importance of embracing agility. They didn't just react to the digital wave, they rode it.
They were like surfers catching a wave. So how do we actually do that? How do we become more agile in our own lives and work?
Well, a big part of it is about being open to new ideas, new ways of doing things. And that can be tough, especially if you're used to a certain routine or way of operating.
It's easy to get stuck in our ways. So how did the Times break free from that?
They were really intentional about creating a culture of experimentation. They weren't afraid to try new things, to fail fast, and learn from their mistakes.
That's so important. It's okay to fail as long as we learn from those failures. But it's not just about being open to change for the sake of change, right? We've got to have a direction, a strategy.
Absolutely. And that's where the second key takeaway comes in. Listen to your customers. The Times' success hinged on their ability to understand what their readers wanted, even before those readers knew it themselves.
It's like they were reading their minds. So how would they do that? Was it all those analytics and data they were collecting?
Data played a huge role, for sure. But it wasn't just about collecting data. It was about using it to uncover the why behind the numbers.
So it's not just about what people are clicking on, it's about why they're clicking on it. What are their motivations, their needs, their desires?
Exactly. And once you understand those deeper motivations, you can start to tailor your products, your services, your content to meet those needs in a way that feels really personalized and meaningful.
Okay, so we've got the agility, we're listening to our audience. What's the secret sauce? What ties it all together?
Well, none of this is possible without the third and perhaps most crucial ingredient: strong leadership. The Times was fortunate to have leaders with a clear vision for the future and the ability to bring the entire organization along on that journey.
They had the map and they knew how to rally the troops. So it's not enough to have a great idea. You need someone who can communicate that vision, inspire others, and navigate the inevitable challenges that come with any big change.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And you know what I find so inspiring about the New York Times' story is that it shows that even institutions with long histories, institutions that might seem set in their ways, can adapt and thrive in the face of disruption.
It's a reminder that it's never too late to reinvent yourself. to challenge the status quo and to embrace the possibilities that change brings.
Well said, and I think that's a perfect note to end on.
It really is. It's been fascinating to delve into this story of reinvention with you. I think there's a lot we can all learn from the New York Times' experience, no matter what our own journeys may hold. So, to our listeners, thank you for joining us for another deep dive. We'll catch you next time as we continue to explore these fascinating stories of innovation, resilience, and the power of human ingenuity.